Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we're reading fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for season 6, episode 4. Rolling on through.
Yep. Well, kind of. It's a very slow going season for us, but
yes. Hopefully this is rolling out to you weekly in a very condensed fashion, unlike how we've actually been filming these. But life is crazy. So anyways, let us just jump right into not podcast business, jump into what we're drinking tonight. Yeah. What are we drinking tonight?
Tonight we are drinking the 2018 Silver Reserve Petite Syrah from none other than Tobin James.
We love you, Tobin.
Let's give it a sniff test.
Mm-hmm. It's a very harsh.
Yeah,
not great.
Almost like a cleaning.
Yeah, kind of almost smells like pine sol. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll taste kind of like piney and Christmassy. Oh.
Yeah, let's give it a taste, see if it bounces out there.
It does have a very alcohol forward taste, but it dissipates quickly into more of that typical spice.
Yeah, almost floral.
Yes,
berry.
A little bit of floral, but I also get almost like cranberry maybe. Or
maybe.
Pomegranate.
Yeah, I get a lot of like floral notes on there.
Yeah, I think that maybe we should have opened this up like 30 minutes ago and maybe.
Tried it first?
Yeah, not tried it first, just let it breathe a little bit. I did open the bottle last week a little bit earlier, and I do feel like that helped kind of release some of that alcohol flavor.
We'll let it air out as we drink it, and we'll let you guys know our thoughts after the movie, as always. So now let's move on to our Slept On It segment. Last week we watched Spaceballs. I rated it an 8.2. You gave it an 8.1.
I'm sorry, that's backwards. I wrote that in there backwards.
I gave it an 8 point something. You gave it an 8 point something. Does your rating change after sleeping on it?
It does not. I mean, I could bump it up maybe to like 8.5, but I just loved it so much. And just thinking about like how much it is based on pop culture, but it also became its own like pop cult classic type movie in its own. And even just from like the light digging I did on the internet for Fact Snacks, like it has like a deep following of people, and just I'm sure there is like so much content on the internet.
Yeah, I think I kind of baked that into my original rating though. So I think mine remains unchanged having slept on it.
Yeah. I mean, my original thought was not really, I think we gave it a pretty high score as it is. It's hard to go too much higher, but I just love it so much.
Well, why don't you go ahead and lay the Fact Snacks on us?
All right, time for some Fact Snacks. So there was a plethora of information on the internet, and it was really hard for me to pare it down. So I'm going to try to keep this brief and concise. First of all, something I forgot to do in the before show for last week was to include the where Spaceballs fell in the numbers of grossing films. And so that's something I'm trying to do more frequently. And so Spaceballs was number 24 of the top grossing movies of 1987, and with a total of 38,119,483.
So it seems like much more of a cult classic than a actual box office success.
Which makes sense. I feel like it's something that like, haha, it's funny the first time, but then it just kind of grows and builds the more you see it. All right, so my next fact snack is that Mel Brooks sent George Lucas a copy of the script for his approval. So George Lucas was very involved in the making of this movie. I mean, not very involved, but he read it, and Mel Brooks like said, is there anything that, is too much? And he loved everything, but his one request was that they didn't sell Spaceballs merchandise because so many of the characters like so similarly resemble Star Wars characters that they didn't want people selling quote unquote Spaceballs merchandise and people like trying to like switch it for Star Wars or whatever. So that was his one request. So even though there's that whole scene about Spaceballs, the sheets, Spaceballs, the lunchbox, like there is no actual merchandise that was sold for it.
Well, dang.
So I thought that was interesting. My next fact snack is that the working title for this movie was Planet Moron. And so I did read some conflicting information, but apparently, so I think he just, Mel Brooks was just, the article I was reading said he does like to keep his titles short and kind of to the point, which, Planet Moron does very much fit these people. One thing that I read said that he knew he wanted space in the title. And I mean, both of the conflicting information said he wanted space in the title, but one thing said that he spilled a drink in his lap and shouted balls. And then that's kind of how, ha ha ha, like balls is a funny way, like thing to say, Spaceballs, haha. And then, and there was another one that had a different story that was not as dramatic as that one. So I'm going to choose to believe
that it was that one, him spilling something on his crotch.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the fact snacks, not fact meals. I did not fully deep dive this, but I forget. I'm sorry that I forget what the other one was, but it was nothing remarkable. It was just a very like, it's like they thought about the term ball, yeah, and it was just like very unremarkable. So who knows? But it was originally called Planet Moron, and I think Spaceballs is better than that
for sure.
My next fact snack is that they went through a lot of different iterations of what John Candy's costume was going to look like. They originally wanted him in like a full outfit, kind of similar to Chewbacca, which is what his character is representing. But they also were like, we have John Candy in this movie. We're not going to completely cover him up. So they ended up with just the little eye patch and everything. But because they opted for that, he had a fully like his ears were all like not done in post, like actual animatronic ears. And he had to carry around a 30-pound battery pack to make the ears. And I don't know if the tail was part of that too, but like all of that stuff was rigged up and he had to carry this battery pack around.
I think I saw on like the credits something being his like animatronics, John Candy's animatronics or something. Person, so there was an actual dedicated person for that. Yeah, so that was all done in real time, and the commitment carrying 30 pounds is not light, and like all that stuff in the desert and everything, like that's pretty wild. Okay, so then my next note is about the two characters that Mel Brooks played. First of all, his character, President Scroob, who is the president of the Spaceballs. Something I read while we were watching the movie last week was that Scroob is actually just Brooks backwards. That's where Scroob comes from. And all my years of watching this movie, I never knew that. So it was kind of a little bit of a like brain blast moment where I was like, oh man, that makes a lot of sense. But it also like, it sounds like a perfect name for his character too. Just feel like Screwball, Skroob, Brooks. Would it be
Borks?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just like
scribbled.
Yes. So I thought that was really interesting. And then he also plays the character of Yogurt, which I think it took me like a couple times of watching the movie to actually figure that out.
Really?
I was like 10 when I saw it for the first time. I don't know.
Because when I think of Mel Brooks, I think of him as being that as opposed to
Scroob. But apparently they wanted Yogurt to not be green like Yoda. They wanted him to be slightly different. So they did that gold face paint, which apparently Mel Brooks was actually allergic to. And they had to be like constantly treating him with Benadryl to keep it like for all the scenes that he had to shoot for that. Cause they just kept using it instead of, finding an alternative.
Find something else.
Yeah. So he supposedly on Benadryl for this whole movie when he was being Yogurt. Okay. There's lots of costume facts and facts in this one. So for Pizza the Hut, they decided to use actual pizza toppings for his costume. So they had to be kept hot so that they could melt and like fall off of him. And the original actor who was portraying Pizza the Hut got burned. There was like a short or something in the electrical heating unit that they were using. And he was like, well, screw you guys. I'm not getting back in that thing. And apparently I think it was like a props person or somebody like stepped in last minute and they like dubbed over the voice in post.
Wow.
But it was like mid shoot and all of a sudden it was smoking and he got like, I think a pretty serious burn. I don't remember to what extent.
Like I get like wanting to, be artistic and stick to the craft, but like sometimes it's like, is it really worth using actual really hot, uncomfortable things for something like this? But
yeah, but I mean, also it was the 80s before there was a lot of actual CGI and the ability to make a lot of those things in post, or I don't know. I
was gonna say like rules and regulations on what you couldn't do.
Also that too. 80s were a different time. All right, I've got two more fact snacks. It was filmed on the same soundstage as Wizard of Oz, which I found was interesting because it was actually parodying some of the parts of Wizard of Oz. We kind of talked about that last week. And then my last fact snack is that, we love knowing which actors were considered for the roles that turned it down. And apparently Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks were both approached to play Lone Star. Bill Pullman was their third choice. But apparently Bill Pullman was, honestly, they were glad that he took the part because they could pay him a lot less than they would have to have paid Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise. So
Tom Cruise would have been terrible.
Oh yeah, he would have been the worst. Like I could see Tom Hanks maybe, but Tom Cruise would have been not right.
He would have played it seriously, seriously. Which should have been funny, honestly, like different way, but no, I think it would have been terrible.
Everything is the way it was meant to be. Yep. And also I think I did also read that they wanted the like captain of the ship, they wanted to be played by Steve Martin, but he also turned it down. So there was a lot of like big names that they were considering, but that fell apart. So he could
have been good in this.
Oh, for sure. He would have been really great.
I think he would have he thrives in this kind of, comedy.
I mean, I think he and Mel Brooks are of similar eras of that comedy. So anyways, that wraps it up for my fact snacks. And I honestly, after like 10 minutes of writing all of these things down back to back to back, I was like, I just have to stop looking because there is so much information out there that we could probably do a whole fact snack episode on just this movie. So there is a lot out there if you want to find more.
All right. So with that, I think we can close the chapter on Spaceballs and move into the movie from this week. What are we watching this week?
This week we are watching Apollo 13, and it is from 1995, and it is also rated PG-13.
It says PG.
PG. I'm sorry, I read PG and my brain just said something different. Forgive me. It's rated PG.
That reminds me, I think we were talking last week about how Spaceballs was PG, and it very much should not have been PG. I can't remember if we mentioned that in the after show. But.
Yeah, I would not. I remember, and I also I remember feeling uncomfortable watching it as like a 10-year-old or however old I was, just being like, I feel like this is inappropriate. And I mean, I'm happy to be included, but I just don't think I'm supposed to be watching this.
Very much on the guidance portion of it, of like maybe your parents like should not let you do it.
Yeah.
Anyways, this one is also rated PG. I don't remember anything too like intense about this, whether I have seen it before. But I don't know if it was enough to push it to PG-13. So we will watch with that critical eye.
Maybe we need to add a note in our review, like, does the rating fit the movie?
That'd be good.
You know, always thinking of things. So with that, are you ready to hop into our time machine?
Sure am. So we are back in 1995, where the top 3 movies released that year were Die Hard with a Vengeance, grossing $366 million. Toy Story, grossing $365 Wow, very close that year. 1 and 2, just like $900,000 off in the difference there. And number 3, GoldenEye, grossing $356 million. 3 very highly grossing movies that year.
For sure.
Apollo 13 was all the way down at number 6, grossing just a measly $335 million. Honestly, not much separating with those.
Right.
$30 million between first and sixth.
Also, that is so much money. Like that's between like there's also 4 and 5 in there that we didn't list. Like that's so much money being spent on the movies. But I also feel like, 90s was still when it was like, you have to go see this in theaters. And that was like a lot bigger deal than it is today.
VCRs and DVD players and home theater systems kind of killed that. And the top 3 songs released that year were Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio and Waterfalls and Creep, both by TLC.
I feel like this is the first time we've had someone have 2 songs like back to back in the top 3. So definitely took me back to that time. I've had Creep stuck in my head since I made this outline.
Yeah.
So
but all 3 songs there, absolute bangers for sure. So I already mentioned that I've seen Apollo 13 before. Have you seen it?
Yes. And we watched it within the last 3 years, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Once we really started getting into space and For All Mankind.
Yeah. So it's been really recent. I am embarrassed to admit how little I do remember about what happened. I mean, I know what happens, but that's not as much as I feel like I should, having watched it so recently.
Yeah, I've sat down, watched it all the way through. This will probably be my 4th time. So I've picked up a lot more on it, as an adult than having watched it as a kid. But I don't want to give away too much in the before, given that we both have seen it. So
yeah, nothing else to say except cheers to Apollo 13. Cheers.
Welcome back.
Apollo 13, man.
Kind of love those slightly stressful space movies, right?
It's like I always talk about how much I love them, but then in practicality, I just hate myself for loving them. Yeah, it is type 2 fun.
Well, speaking of stressful for me, having to remember everything I say about the wine scale.
Well, that's your fault for picking something and sticking to it.
And just never writing down what I say.
I know, but you got it.
We're going to talk about the wine first. Our wine, we rated on a 0 to 10 scale. However, it is heavily weighted, given that all the wine we drink on this podcast is very good wine. So a low score does not necessarily mean that it is a bad wine. Every wine we drink on this show is a good wine. That being said, I'm going to rate this wine a 3.8.
See, now you've
give me your score. Give me your score.
My score I settled on was a 5.7, but I was originally thinking of 4.7. But it was just that I'd talked myself up too much that you kind of validate what I was originally thinking. So you see my hesitation is I was like, oh, I feel like I need to rate it under 5, but it is still really good. And then I talked myself up.
It like I said, heavily weighted does not mean it's a bad wine. It just was a bit too sour for my liking.
The first taste I had tonight tasted like a Christmas tree. And I don't know what about it. Maybe it's just how some Christmas candles smell super, super pungent. But I was just maybe it's just that wood, piney. I don't know. But it was, and then it went down after that. But that first taste,
kind of tasted like some like not fully ripe strawberry to me. That's what I got a lot of. So, anyways, now we can move into the movie rating out of 10. Would you like to go first, since I went first for the wine?
Sure. This one is tough because it's a great movie, like really great movie. But then I go back to your rubric, which I feel like is a solid rubric for what we are trying to accomplish with this podcast of quotability. It is quotable. Rewatchability. It is physically taxing. If it's on, I don't know how much I'm going to be like, yeah, let me sit down and watch the rest of this. How much does it affect pop culture? It was based on pop culture. I don't think it affected pop culture going forward. Then there's a fourth thing.
How much overall enjoyment?
Oh, overall enjoyment. Stressful. So I am going to give this one a 7.3.
I'm going with an 8.0. I think that obviously quotable, like use me of a problem, failure's not an option. Like not super quotable, like in everyday life, just kind of like you just remember those memorable moments from there. Like rewatchability, it's long. I'll probably rewatch like parts of it if it's on, but it's not something I'm just going to sit down and like that night and just be like, let's watch this. It's a very long, intense movie. And
it's not to say we won't watch it again. We've already seen it before. We talked about that. Like it is a great movie, but it's not like
you're not going to casually watch it. It's a bit taxing.
A commitment.
Yeah. The cultural significance though, I will say, I think that it is very culturally significant. Like the whole Houston, we have a problem is just like a phrase that's so ingrained in our culture now. I think the way that it portrays space also and like the mission, all that sort of stuff, mission control, I think it did an amazing job. Probably the first or best that I can think of after having watched like this season of doing that. And I think that it's so culturally significant in that this isn't like the moon landing. It's a failed mission, but people think more about Apollo 13, honestly, than at least of our generation think of like the actual moon landing itself. There's more movies, I think, or like movies about the moon landing and like that whole era. But I think that when people think of like space and like NASA launches, they think about this movie.
I see that.
So I think that's kind of like the cultural significance there of like, it's like the quintessential like NASA space launch movie.
Yeah. I appreciate all of that. I think my thought process is like thinking about just like the overlap we've seen of like, oh, like this technology on this film, like from like an actual filmmaking standpoint. And like how comedy is told or like whatever, or space is shown. Yes, they did a good job with simulating all the stuff that they simulated, but I don't know. I do still think it's a great movie. Do not think that I think less of it. It's just, given all of those things, I'm feeling 7.3.
It is a good, like mine was docked, and I'll kind of get into a little bit in some of the aging a little bit, but also like the overall enjoyment. It's just really long, and the rewatchability a bit. The quotability not too terribly strong, but I think it is like culturally significant of like, you can't say you've like done a space season without having Apollo 13 in there. It just is.
It had to be in here for sure.
Yeah. So moving on to the movie description.
Okay. Everybody's favorite part of the whole
I will
podcast.
go first, as always. NASA space launch goes awry, and all of NASA has to rally around finding innovative engineering solutions to get them home safely.
That was very good. Very concise. I liked that. Also, before I read mine, I take a picture of what our TV shows for the description and everything, and it shows the Rotten Tomato score and a star rating, and I would just like to go on record as saying that it has a 7.4 star rating.
Ooh.
So I'm like pretty right close on the money. Yeah. So anyways, the description according to our TV is the true story of technical troubles that scuttle the Apollo 13 lunar mission. You have to have a fun word in there.
Scuttle.
The Apollo 13 lunar mission in 1970, risking the lives of astronaut Jim Lovell and his crew. I'm not going to name everybody. There's only 3 people.
They called him astronaut. Like that's a descriptor. I was hoping like confident or improvising as engineer, like something to
just really zhuzh up his
dashing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Risking the lives of astronaut Jim Lovell and his crew, with the failed journey turning into a thrilling saga of heroism. Drifting more than 200,000 miles from Earth, the astronauts work furiously with the ground crew to avert tragedy. I think it's a good description.
It's fine.
It's not as fluffy as some of the other ones are, but
I'm starting to really appreciate the really fluffy ones just because they make them sound like so like overselling it.
Right. And And as much as I hate it because I have to giggle my way through it, there's just something about like you see the word, I see it coming before I say it out loud, and I just
I'm always hoping for some extra adjectives.
Dying laughing, and it's better like when there's one, and then there's another one right after that, and I just can't get through it. Oh, I have grown to appreciate it.
Yeah, especially when it's like an adjective like you don't use in
any that no one ever uses.
Not even close to everyday language. Was the movie what you expected?
Yes, I've seen it before.
Yes, have seen it. Also based on a true story, like fairly well there.
Based on a book written by the person that it happened to, so I feel pretty confident in it being well done.
How well did it age?
I mean, as I say often, it is based on an actual event in a specific time period. So I think the actual events and the things that happen are fine. There was some CGI. Well, there's some CGI that was way better than I was expecting coming from a 1995 movie. Is that nice? This 95?
Yeah.
That was impressive. But then there was some where it was like, ooh.
Yeah, that was kind of what doctored in some of the score for me was some of the CGI. I think it was probably fine, like not broadcast in 4K, like remastered. It probably looked a lot better when it was just like on a regular TV screen in the late 90s, early 2000s. But some of it now, like you're looking at, especially with a somewhat critical eye, you're like, yeah, that's pretty fake. Yeah, that was definitely CGI. Or they filmed this like helicopter flying through and then they CGI'd an actual like shuttle there on the dock afterwards.
Yeah, unless you're really looking for it, I think a lot of it is easy to overlook. But especially for us, we're sitting here watching, taking notes, like really combing through stuff. Yeah. We're combing the desert.
Well, the worst of it though was in space. When they were in space, like showing the sparks and the debris flying off of that was really kind of like.
I think that was actually the worst. I feel like some of the ones of the spaceship were like obviously CGI, like before it took off when
Gary Sinise's character,
was on the ground, like that was like obviously CGI, but it also looked better than I was expecting it to. So
yeah, I kind of feel that.
All right, could this movie be made today?
100%. Please make it into like a mini series. I would watch the hell out of it.
Love it. Love.
Like a 6-7 part series, I think would be really good.
But don't do more than that. Don't make it a multi-season thing. Just
for sure.
Do what needs to be done.
We don't need a whole bunch of spinoffs either. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
Yes.
Yes, it was the name of the mission.
Yes.
So for sure, plenty of times.
But it was not it was not obnoxious. It was done in the way it would have been actually delivered, and not a Apollo 13 or like some like dramatic gasping.
Or this is the unlucky Apollo. We're gonna call it Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Really like overselling it. Does the title fit the movie?
I don't know what else you'd call it. I think it
Catastrophe in Space.
Yeah. Anything else gets cheesy.
Houston, we have a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
No, Apollo 13 is about as good as you can get.
I feel like a space movie called Houston about Command Center would be really cool. Just calling it Houston. None of the extra fluffy stuff. Just keep it simple.
Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things? Depends on your definition of bigger things.
Yeah. And it's hard because like it is a big name cast. I would my knowledge of their filmography and where this falls in this is not great. But they definitely were big name people for sure.
Yeah. I want to say like overall, not really. I mean, you had like obviously Tom Hanks, Gary Sinise, Bill Paxton, the main guys, Kevin Bacon. They were all kind of in like the middle of their career there.
And Ed Harris. And there was the guy who was in The Grinch, but he was in other stuff. The little kid, his son, Jim Lovell's son, was on Full House.
So the guy that was in The Grinch, do you want to know who he is?
Sure.
He's Clint Howard.
Okay.
Ron Howard's younger brother. Ron Howard also directed The Grinch. So.
Love that. Because I saw his name on the thing after the movie was over. And I was like, okay, I don't know who this is. I mean, he's just very clearly the guy from The Grinch that plays Mayor, whatever's assistant. And that did not connect at all. Thank you. That's very interesting.
And also the grandma in this movie was
Ron Howard's mom.
Was Ron Howard's mom. Jean Spiegel Howard.
Huh.
So had a whole lot of nepotism going on here. Everyone collecting their paychecks, but overall, I think they all did a really good job. So no complaints there, but just found it really interesting.
Yeah. Very cool. Very good. Good. You're just some like early fact snacks.
Some snackatizers.
Factitizers.
Factitizers.
I was just thinking you're going to say snackatizers.
And then we realized there was just the two wrong words to combine there. Yes.
I'm so glad that we're on the same page.
Factitizers. What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture? We kind of covered that already. Do you feel cultured after watching it?
Yes.
Yes, but also like I've also seen it a bunch of times.
I mean, I'd seen it before, but watching it again, I feel like, especially because it is based on something that actually happened to real people, kind of like brings you back into that.
And also, full disclosure, I did not know it was based on a true story the first like 2 times I watched it.
Dude.
It seemed pretty unrealistic.
I mean, fair.
I also was not around when it actually happened. This was in the era of watching all these
20 years
space
before
movies. Yeah. So, moving on to notes. Who goes first? I don't remember.
I think I probably went first for Spaceballs. Isn't it terrible that we can't remember week to week?
Yeah, but also not surprising.
I'll let you go first.
Yes. So my first notes. First note was Ron Howard and him directing this, and mentioned like his family that was in it. But also like it starts out saying like a Ron Howard film, and like I don't really know what that means really. Like I'm trying to find like what the common veins are between like what his movies look like. I feel like I know like a Scorsese, I know a Quentin Tarantino. A Ron Howard's directed a lot of like really good big movies, but like I don't know what necessarily is the common thread that I see between this, except maybe like his family also being in it. Yeah.
I mean, I know he is a director and he directs fine movies. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah. And I'm not one that can like very obviously pick out a director. I think I just like haven't ever paid super close attention to it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
So in one of the behind the screens I did before is like this, a lot of times the director and I think the cinematographer would kind of like work together throughout mm-hmm. most of their career. And that's more what people attribute to the director because of that, you get that same look and same feel. So maybe that's what's different here if he doesn't use the same cinematographer between each of these, because all these movies are very different. The Grinch.
You're telling me the Grinch and Apollo 13 are different? What?
Slightly different genres, movies, everything about them.
Fictional, factional.
Which one's fact? I don't know. So I don't know what the common link is there, but I'd like to eventually explore that. Mentioned all the people that were in this. Next note was being in the simulator would be so freaking cool.
Yes.
Like I wish I could just like go play with one of those, and
I just want to push all the buttons.
Like I know it's gonna take like hours, and like I'd like to do it in that simulator and not the one like at Mission Space in Disney World.
God, no,
that would be absolutely beyond miserable. But I feel like being in there and be like, okay, this is going on. I've got to press all these buttons in the right order, and like just playing around with that and have it be as realistic as it possibly can be with all the camera visuals and everything like that. Mm-hmm. Which I think my next note was that I almost feel like all the simulators and all the stuff they built to support the ship, even just launching and all that, is arguably more impressive than the actual space shuttle itself.
Agreed. I have my second note is the simulations are wild. Mm-hmm. And I was going to go into first the fact that they even know how to simulate or prepare or make buttons click and do things, and just like just in general in the ships and in the simulators, the sheer number of buttons, and that you have to know what every single one of those does, and the mental power it takes for any human to do the simulator or the real life thing. Just I am incompetent.
And that's those all I can have to not only like function and do something, but they have to act as if you are in space doing those same things. They have to replicate all this stuff and behave the same way, and they have to have the people behind the screen kind of like testing them out and be like, okay, what if this thing fails, and simulating that. To have all that work is a lot of work to get that right.
In the 1960s and 70s.
Right. While they're all racing against Russia to get even just into space.
That is what blows my mind the most. I think I will never, ever get over that all of this space race stuff happened before Apple.
Right.
Tablet, like real actual tablets. Those were just like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if you could carry around this thing and it's like a computer? Mm-hmm. And like, that's what life is. And we have talked about, I think in our sci-fi season, that a lot of these science fiction things have then turned into things that we've actually been able to make. But like knowing the technology we have now, like sure, space travel would make sense. We can know and do so many things, but just like seeing their computer screens with the like actual pixels that you can see, and then like it's just a black and white screen. I'm like, I don't know how you have to
go into space like that.
Ever figure that out, let alone as the human going up into space. We're like, I trust this technology.
But even beyond that, it's like, okay, they have like the building where they are building the actual spaceship in, the space shuttle in, and the fact that they have to then like transport it from point A to point B to actually get it out to the launch site. They have all these things holding it in place that as it launches have to like kind of like tear away all these different like things they didn't even think about. Everyone thinks about like, oh, the rocket ship like just goes into space.
I was thinking about the things tearing away when they showed it in the movie. I was like, I just would not trust. There are billions of things that could go wrong.
And billions of dollars on this thing. If you are the one guy who just like didn't get that thing just quite right and like the whole thing blows up, which it obviously had before, like so many things have to go right to get that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, think about, there have been a lot of successful missions, but there's been a lot of unsuccessful things too. And just like all of that.
It's insane, the scale of that. My next note was, surely they practiced having a backup in the crew more than 3 days out.
Right.
So like, I know you've got like a backup crew, but you have to kind of also, and they're testing all these various possible permutations of things like, okay, what if the thrusters go out? What if this goes out? Wouldn't you want to test like, hey, what if we had to replace one of the people at any point and just kind of have them all work with each other?
Right.
I feel like that's just kind of a no-brainer there. I would like to know if that was actually real or not. Because I feel like even like in like football, they're practicing different like lineups and different people out there just because you know eventually someone is going to get nicked up and have to like come in. You like with the whole,
and the amount of testing they do, and like, oh, you had an ear infection. We are moved up to something that's happening 6 months from now. Like the slightest little variable in your health is just like, it's going to change everything. That you'd have to be more prepared than that.
For sure. Next note was, all those guys, they get into space, like their launch, it's kind of like evened out, whatever, and they immediately like take their helmet off and get out of their spacesuit. Couldn't pay me to take off my helmet in space. I'd just be there the whole week long you're in there, full suit the entire time. I don't care how comfortable I am, leaving it on.
The second they start to release it and like take all their gloves off, I'm like, and just like want to hold my breath until they have them back on again. And they don't even wear them on reentry. Why are they wearing them when they go up, but not when they go back down?
And like even also, anytime anything goes wrong, like an alarm goes off, if I had taken it off, be like immediately like, all right, zip it back up, helmet
like,
on.
Is it all stored away somewhere? Would you have to go and get it? Like how screwed would you be?
Yeah, that's why they just leave it on. Next note was that they referenced the theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes, ding.
Another
crossover
reference. Next note was that I wish they had a better signal for how much time it passed.
Yes, I thought the same thing. I was like, I don't know how long it's been since they launched. They kept saying like day 4, but they like, I feel like they had a big jump in days. And especially once they like, or I wish they had like almost like a counter that they would keep putting up once it exploded. Like, okay, it's been an hour. It has been 6 hours. It is like, cause I was having such a hard time following that.
Or how much time is later? I also would have appreciated kind of like a overall timeline that they might have like put at the bottom of the screen each time they kind of time jumped ahead to be like, oh, this far into the mission. And then like once the thing exploded, be like new mission, like and kind of recalibrate how far into the mission they really are, just kind of get a sense of time. Cause I did kind of have a tough time like figuring out like, okay, did this all happen in the first like 24 hours and they had like 6 more days to get home, or was this like 3 days in of a
and they kept talking about how they hadn't slept, and I'm like, have they not slept for a week? Have they not slept for 36 hours? Like, I mean, I just had such a hard time gauging all of the time in this. And I think there should have been better like documentation of that on the screen. And at one point they popped up and it was like day 5. And I was like, oh, day 5. And then I was like, I have no idea what day 5 means. So I think they could have done that better for sure.
Would have been really nice. Just the visual reference. My next note was that they don't hang on to the quotes as much as you'd expect, given how big they are there. The whole Houston, we have a problem. It like immediately cuts away as soon as he says that. And same thing with the Ed Harris, failure is not an option. It's like immediately cuts to the next scene after that. And you'd think with just how like monumental those quotes are, that there would be like the camera hanging on them for like 3 seconds after they say that, or something more happening. It's like, it's surprising to me just how quickly they cut away after that.
Yes, I agree. But I also kind of love that they didn't. I think it was just kind of like this is what's really happening, where we can't pause for dramatic effect here. Like we have to like keep going. And I appreciate that they didn't oversell it. Yeah.
Next note was, I would love to know how many decisions that Gene had to make, like where he had to make like a gut choice. Cause you kind of see him like weighing some of these options and just be like, okay, we're going with this one. I want to know how many choices he made that they went back and like debriefed on, or like figured out what went wrong, or like how it all happened. Where he like, if he had chosen wrong at some of those like 50-50 gut choice of like, no, here's the one for going, could have completely scuttled the mission.
True. I mean, like we've already said, like a billion things can go wrong on just the launch, but then how many more billions of things could have gone wrong once the explosion happened and all the choices that they had to make. And like, there's so many people, like that's a lot of moving parts. And obviously to like fix the CO2 filter, you need a team of people. It shouldn't just be on one person. To fix the amps thing, Like it needed to be a team effort, but like it's also just like a lot of variability, and that's very stressful.
And some of those things were time sensitive of like, we have to do this now, and like then they're counting down the amps at the very end. Like if he'd held on to some of these decisions for like, 30 more minutes or something, would that have or it would have been 15 more minutes or 10 more, like how close were they to really just like going over the edge on any of those?
Yeah. And I wonder what kind of documentation was taken, like where it was all of their conversations recorded, and then they went back and like used that to kind of figure out how they got from point A to point B, like how much debriefing was done after the fact too, and how much did they
absolute ton of
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact they were able to be able to figure out what happened on the ship is crazy to me, but I would be really interested to read more into that.
Yeah. And if I don't notice that the real Jim level is 96.
And Fred is 91.
Well, I was just going to say Jim is 96 and Mel Brooks is 98. So just keep that fun fact with you.
Just for more space season crossover. I was shocked to see that Fred and Jim were still alive. Like that's impressive, especially because I feel really bad that I can't remember the other guy's name. I got to look it up. I can't keep talking about this movie and not know his name.
The real life hack there is just go into space and apparently live a lot longer. Or maybe
Jack. Well, Ken is the one that was on the ground. Jack Swigert. It says Swigert here. I don't know if they changed it to Swaggart
in there,
right? He the fact because I looked him up first while we were watching, and it said that he died at 51, and I was like, God, that is very depressing. That's so sad. And then I go to click on Jim Lovell, and I was like, no death date. And I was like, oh my God, he's still alive. He's 96. That's crazy.
Yeah. Either going into space makes you live longer, or maybe it's just these guys were really fit. And
probably that they were really fit.
Yep.
You got to go through some serious trauma to go up into space. All right. That concludes your notes. Okay. Going into my notes. So note number 1 is seeing the astronauts at the party at the beginning, like at the house party, is just so weird to me because I think, like Buzz Aldrin, obviously they're have characters in it at the end, but like you think of them like in the spacesuits or in the even just like the NASA jumpsuits and in the simulators, and I always associate them like in the environment where they're supposed to be, and seeing them being like, oh, like we're gonna go up soon, and just like existing in normal life. I think I had a second note about it too, that astronauts in real life just doesn't seem right because like in my mind they belong exclusively in the NASA building or
in their spacesuits or their whatever.
The fact that they could be like, like playing with like toys with their kids or just all of those things, just my brain was like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And obviously we've watched like plenty of other space movies about real astronauts, and I don't know, this is the first time where it was just really like jarring for me to be like, but how can you possibly be functioning in real life? You're going to space.
I also think like now I wonder how many movies we've watched that were filmed like before the actual events here took place.
Oh, how many like of our Culture Night movies we've watched that took place before 1970? Not too many.
Yeah, some, but like it's kind of crazy thinking of some of these things taking place at the same time.
Oh, yeah, that is weird. That kind of hurts my brain now that I like let that sink in. That's wild. So I said, speaking of wild, I said that my next note was that the simulations are wild, and just like, and I think we touched on it too in The Right Stuff of the amount of like physical simulations they had to put the astronauts through in The Right Stuff of being like in the almost like torture chamber to test their like psychological levels. And like, so like that whole physical thing was covered in The Right Stuff, but the actual like technical simulators too. It's a whole range of stuff. It's crazy. And so my next note is I would 100% be like his wife, but what scenario is that? Oh, when he says he's going to the moon, and you can like talk about facial acting. Cause we loved that. Her face is like, oh my God. Like you can just tell she instantly is like, nope, I'm unprepared for this. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I want to die. I'd hate this. Don't do it.
Yep.
And just like, I spent the whole movie just like relating, obviously as a woman, and just like having some mild anxiety myself, that the idea of you like putting yourself into these scenarios that are wildly dangerous, I would not be able to function. And the way she was able to keep herself so calm and cool. I mean, obviously you could see she was
hosting a
upset.
house party during that.
I mean, I think there were people there to like take care of her kids and feed her and like be there. But I'd be like, y'all can be here. Take care of my children. I'm going to be in my room by myself, projectile vomiting until he lands. Like the fact that she just like she like breaks down a couple times. I would just be hysterically sobbing, throwing up, or asleep. Because I just
all
like
of them.
Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't do it. And then like the second he lands and they're like all happy and stuff, I'd be projectile vomiting again too. I just like wouldn't be able to physically control myself.
Yep.
I talk about the right stuff. I am built with the wrong stuff here.
Yeah. Space moms, man. Crazy.
Okay. My next note is Tom Hanks' voice. It just never changes, not even a little bit. And it's like the second I heard him, I was just like, nope, there he is. I mean, his voice is just so distinct.
There's also one point where he kind of bent over laughing and back up, and it was like the exact same. I could picture him in like Forrest Gump almost.
Mm-hmm. And I also hate it because like as soon as I hear his voice, all I think of is Woody from Toy Story.
Oh, I forgot one of my notes there. Speaking of Tom Hanks and Gary Sinise, the year before this was Forrest Gump, which they were both in, and
Forrest Gump was only 94.
And when Forrest tells Lieutenant Dan that he's a shrimp boat or going to be a shrimp boat captain, Lieutenant Dan says, "The day that you're a shrimp boat captain is the day I'm an astronaut."
Love that.
So connections there.
Do we count that as like another like?
I think so. I mean,
kinda?
like, at least a half.
We can't start counting halves. That's far too much for me to keep up with. But I will give you a ding for that one.
But I think that's really, really cool.
That is crazy. And it's also, I mean, it's been a long time since we watched Forrest Gump. Obviously, that was like way back in the first season. But I would have said it was like 80s. I don't know why, but it just feels like maybe we're just getting old is really what that is. All right. My next note is, I want to throw up just thinking about it. Instant claustrophobia when they close the shuttle door before launch, and like the guy's on the outside and he's just like thumbs up, like good luck. And just like you hear the door like crank shut, and I can just feel my body being like, nope, get me out of here. Nope.
Well, I feel like you can kind of see Tom Hanks looking up with like a scared, like, yep, I guess we're doing this type.
I'd be expression. Like, I'm the abort switch. Me, abort, get me out of here. Not for me. So clearly, as you can tell, I went through a lot of like physical anxiety just watching this movie. I'm really not cut out for the real life
I wonder
stuff.
at what point during that launch sequence you could like actually say like, no, wait. Like at what point is it kind of like a, yep, we're past the 10-second countdown. You're going up.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure anybody would really want to try that though. All right. My next note is doing math under pressure when they were like, he's like, I can't really read my own writing. Like I'm getting tired, and they all start doing the calculations, and to be able to confidently be like, no, you're good. But like, I feel like I would be so second guessing myself of like trying to do this quickly because I know that a lot of stuff is on the line. And like, this is like a big, huge deal if I'd be able to like add correctly.
Right. Well, luckily they had like 3 sets of math nerds on.
Yes. The fact that they kept
to be like, we all 3 double checked it. You're right.
Yeah. And honestly, it felt like it was more than 3 too. They're like, yep. And I was just, yep. Like, thank God we're having multiple checks here. But I would not want to be the first one to say, yep. I would rather be like, okay, they said yes. Okay, then I must also be correct. My next note is that I loved the attention to detail, like their facial hair. Like the longer they were gone, like you could tell they weren't, not that they were not caring for themselves, but like they had so much going on, and they were not like sitting there shaving or doing anything like that. That I thought that was really well done, that they really thought about, okay, like this scene takes place in this sequence, like you have to look like this. And
I just liked how they looked so tired. Even when they landed and they got back on the Iwo Jima, you could see like the red in their eyes of being like, we have not slept in several days, and we definitely didn't sleep on this plane ride or helicopter ride over.
And that, like Fred really looked sick. Like his eyes were all red, like actually skin red. And you could just tell he looked very unwell. That I think they did a really good job with the makeup and, tracking where the scenes were and making sure they kind of, their physical appearance matched where they would be in that whole sequence. My last note is white shirts and dark ties. Just when they would just show the grounds crew in mission control, and they all, some had long sleeves, some had short sleeves, but they all had white shirts. Maybe variations on white, like maybe a little bit of like a cream color, but no blue.
Skinny black ties.
Yes. No blue shirts, no red shirts, no yellow shirts, no Dwight yellow shirts. Like they were all white with very dark tie, whether it was, some had like some red in it. They all had like a little different detail to them, but I thought it was just such a good time capsule of what that fashion sense was like.
Yep.
Just very, so, and I think it's also like so obvious because people don't dress like that anymore. So it really stands out from this 2024 lens of like, ooh, there's a look.
Didn't really have many ways to like stand out in that kind of crowd. You were expected to be like clean shaven and wearing that exact same outfit of everyone else. Just another cog in the system.
Yep. Oh, and also speaking of wardrobe, can we just talk about how, I don't even know what the right word is. Hot is the one that comes to mind. The like NASA jumpsuits are like, they are a look with the aviator sunglasses. I mean, I think like all the military have some sort of like jumpsuit like that. But I noticed them a lot in like For All Mankind too, that we've watched a lot, and like seeing them here and just like the one piece.
Do you think I should like start wearing that around the house?
If you want to, I wouldn't say no. Oh, if you want to dress up like an astronaut for Halloween one year, support.
No, I was talking about like just out in public. Just that's my new look.
No, that would be embarrassing. There's a line. Halloween is fine. Maybe just inside the house or like for the pod.
Here we go.
Costumes.
Oh, that'd been good. We should have done that.
Oh, that would have been so fun. God, we missed opportunity.
We won't have to worry about what we're going to wear for the pod. Just wear a spacesuit whole season.
Oh man, we have really, we missed that one right there.
Maybe another season.
Yeah. But I just seeing them here again, I was like, I mean, no matter who it's on, I just always am like, that is just such a good look.
Timeless too.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up with my notes. Do you have any other thoughts?
Not at this point.
No, it was a great movie though. Really well done. The acting was fantastic. They really, I mean, as you can tell, I was so anxious watching the whole movie. They really built the drama, told the story really well. And I do have one last note, and then I promise I'm done. It's a very good movie, but I find movies that are based on real life stressful because my knowledge of the actual event is not great. Like I know loosely what happens, but then I'm like, I feel like I need to know, okay, like how many other missions had they flown before this? Like, I feel like I need to know everybody's backstory going into that. And so that I'm like, I just need to read Wikipedia. I know, but I just like, I feel like I need to know so that I'm processing everything right. That I find that's like another layer of stress to watching a movie that's rooted in reality is like, I want to understand everything. So I'm making sure I'm getting the most out of the movie.
I don't know. What I find I prefer not to even know going in if it's based on a true story or rooted in reality in that sense, because I think it kind of puts a ceiling on how crazy it can get. Because if it was like the maximum crazy, then I'd be like, okay, well, I would have already heard about this, like clearly. Like if they just like exploded and died, I'd been like, oh, that was the Apollo 13 mission. Like you would have just known that as much. But I do love when it is a based on a real movie, going back afterwards and seeing just how close to reality that was, like how much creativity or creative license did they take in some of these things.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to reading more about this and
some fact snacks.
Yes, we will be back with some fact snacks for next week. So if you enjoyed tonight's episode, if you would rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, or if you are watching on YouTube, if you could like this video, and if you're enjoying all of our podcasts, if you could subscribe to our podcast channels and to our YouTube channel, we would much appreciate it. And sometimes we post reels on Instagram, so you can follow us on Instagram at Culture Night Pod. If you have any questions, any input, fact snacks, you can email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. Or if you have any other thoughts, you can also write a comment on YouTube and Instagram or DM us or whatever. And thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week.
Cheers.